All right, so then we'll just go ahead and get started. This is our Protecting Children Online presentation. We know that kids are online more than ever. We know that the internet is constantly evolving, and so it's really important that we stay up to date and as parents know that there are things that we can do and have awareness around the risks associated with the online world. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction of myself. I'm Sabrina Mendoza. I am the Prevention Education Lead here at the Center for Child Protection. Prior to joining the center, where I have been for about 2 years now, I did work for the Department and Family Protective Services, working with families who did have children removed from their care due to allegations of abuse and neglect, and I helped them in that reunification process. So my job and my goal was to connect them to services and resources with the hopes that they would be able to have their children back in their care by the end of the case. And through that work, I was able to see a lot of positive outcomes when families had resources, education, support. There was so many positive results. And so that's what brought me to this side of child advocacy into the prevention world. If you are not familiar with us as an organization, we are the Center for Child Protection. We do like to make the distinction that we are not CPS. We do work very closely with CPS, and I know that our name sounds a little familiar, but we are actually a children's advocacy center. This is part of a national nonprofit, so we are nationwide, and there are about 70 advocacy centers here in the state of Texas, and we're the one that serves Travis County. So we are that first stop for kids anytime there has been an allegation of physical abuse, sexual abuse, or if a child has witnessed a violent crime. And we provide four main services, including our forensic services, our medical services. We provide free therapy services as well. And then we have our education services, which is myself, my colleagues, and we just go out and provide trainings just like this one to the community, really working towards our overall vision, which is to end the cycle of child abuse through advocacy, education, and community support. So let's look at what we're going to cover today. So we are going to go over understanding the current risks and dangers of the internet. So we're going to talk about what apps kids are using today, what the risks are associated with those apps. We're going to talk about some tips and resources for how to monitor our kids online and so they can receive the benefits of the online world, but do it in a way that's safe. And then we're going to learn how to talk to our kids about these issues. How do we have those conversations? So we're going to first define what it means when we talk about being online, right? So when we say our kids are online, what does that look like? This could be smartphones, smartwatches, laptops, gaming systems such as Xbox or PlayStation. This could be Chromebooks, laptops, even things like Google Home, right? Or Alexa Home. And so all of those tools and devices are ways that kids are accessing the online world. And something to also think about is if you are a parent who maybe doesn't believe in having devices for your children when it comes to the online world, they're still getting access when they're at school or when they go and visit a friend's house or a cousin's house. The online world is all around us and it's not going anywhere. And so whether you're a parent who allows your child to have a device or not, it's still important to know this information because we can't keep them from it. We know that that's not realistic. They're eventually going to have access to the online world at some point. So something to really think about as we are going through this presentation today is what are some of those apps that your kids are using? What kind of websites and games do they like to play? And I want you to really reflect on whether you know or not. Because if you don't know, this is a really great time for you to go and talk to your child about what they're doing and to be familiar with some of the apps and games and websites that they're on. And if you do know, great, spend some time learning a little bit more about how they're using it, and what that access looks like. So here is a list of different apps and platforms that kids are using. This is pulled from a national organization called Thorn, where they basically asked kids what the most popular apps were, and data shows that these apps here are some of the most popular and most common ones that our children are using. I'm sure some of you might be familiar with Roblox, for instance, TikTok, Instagram. A lot of kids are on Discord. Um, and so this is just kind of understanding what our kids are doing. A lot of times when we do these presentations, parents will say, well, which app is the safest or which one is the most dangerous? And the reality is all access to the online world has risk, and it's less about the particular app and more about the features that are built into these apps, right? So we can't state that one app is more dangerous than the other or safer than the other. We want to look at those online features that make these apps risky. So some things that we want to think about when looking at the online world are some of those risks, such as inappropriate content, right? Kids are getting access to online inappropriate content much quicker and much easier than it was, I know, than when I was a child. And what we're seeing is that 1 in 5 youth experience unwanted online exposure to sexually explicit material. And a big piece of that is that unwanted. Sometimes kids are watching something on YouTube, or an ad pops up on a child-friendly game, or maybe they're searching something for homework. And we know that the internet can take you to different places, whether you meant to or not. And so kids are accidentally seeing sexually explicit material or violent content um, on accident. And that's really something that we want to be mindful of when it comes to the online world. We also know that kids are experiencing cyberbullying, and bullying has been around since the beginning of time. The only difference is back in the day before technology, children were able to come home from school and have a safe space where they are free from the bullying. But now with technology, what we're seeing is that children are taking that bullying with them. They don't really have an escape, and it's also happening on such a bigger scale because more people can see the bullying and engage with the bullying. Strangers might even be bullying them. And so what we have seen is that more than 1 in 3 children will experience severe cyberbullying, and only 1 in 10 kids will talk to their parents about being bullied. So if we're seeing that our children's behavior is changing, or when they're on their devices, they're getting frustrated or anxious or upset, we want to make sure we're having conversations, because kids likely will not tell us if they are being bullied. We also know that kids are getting more access to strangers as well. So kids, have the ability to talk to people that they don't know online. What we've seen from research is that 40% of kids grades, fourth grade to eighth grade, are talking to strangers regularly on the internet. And a lot of kids don't even see these individuals as strangers, especially if they're playing on platforms with them regularly. Also, we oftentimes as parents feel this sense of false safety when our children are, excuse me, when our children are in our care at home in their rooms, because we know that they're with us, and we might be quick to feel anxious when we're out in the real world. When a stranger's walking too close, we might grab our kids. However, kids can be talking to strangers in the safety of their home when they're sitting right next to us and we have no idea. So sometimes we have to really think about, is the online world more fearful, or is it the physical world that we tend to be more scared of, when in reality, they're getting access to people that they don't know in seconds when on their devices. So some features to be aware of. This is a really important piece, right? When we talk about what apps are the safest, we really want to look at some of the features that are available on the platforms that our kids have. So something to think about is location tracking. Essentially, we know that there's apps out there where it's tracking our location, such as Instagram or Snapchat. Kids can post stories and tag their location that they were at the museum or at the park, right? It can be fun for them to share, um, where they're at on vacation. But what we also know is that kids oftentimes are adding people that they don't know or don't have their pages on private. And as a result, anyone is able to see where their location is because they're not turning off these features. We also want to be mindful of any platforms that have photo and video sharing. So this is where children can receive and send images and videos of themselves. We know that there's a huge increase in children sending inappropriate photos of themselves, taking photos that are embarrassing of their peers and sharing it online. We also know that sometimes strangers online are pretending to be other kids by, using photos of other children and saying, that that's who they are. And then we also want to look at chat features. So any kind of apps or platforms that have the ability to communicate with others, whether that is through direct message, voice chat, video chat, and even disappearing messages. There are apps that have the ability to, after you send a message and the other person reads it, it disappears. And this can be dangerous because oftentimes kids are thinking that they can send inappropriate things and it disappear and never, no one see it. However, we know things can be screenshotted. People can take photos, of those messages and so on. But also perpetrators can talk to children and know that these messages might disappear. So there might not be any evidence of the inappropriate conversations that are happening. Some important terms to know. Now, because the internet is constantly evolving, there's a lot of new terms that have come up when it comes to the online world. One that we want to be mindful of and has shown up recently in recent years is generative artificial intelligence, which we've all heard the term AI. So this is just technology where somebody can type in a prompt and you know the AI intelligence basically will show them an image or respond to that prompt. And sometimes kids are using AI to create things like deep fakes, which are images that are manipulated of real people, showing them doing something or saying something that they never did. So sometimes kids will get an image of a peer's, from the yearbook, upload it to this generative AI and platform, and then have it say, "I want to see this person doing something embarrassing," and the image will pop up. Of course, it'll be fake. However, they'll use that image to then share amongst their peers to embarrass or harass or humiliate their peers as well. And then we're also seeing peer victimization. So through some of these GAI platforms, kids are also taking very innocuous, innocent photos of their peers and putting them through what we call nudify apps. And essentially it generates sexually explicit images of their peer, and they use that to bully, harass, or exploit their classmates. So now we're going to dive into the online crimes that are happening against children. And this information can be very jarring. It is scary to learn about, but really this is about having awareness so that we know what's out there and how we can prepare our children and ourselves to be safer in the online world. And so I do want to give a content warning. This is very heavy, what we are going to be talking about next. So if you need to take a pause at any point, please do so. If you need to maybe skip a couple of things that you're hearing because it's triggering, Absolutely make sure you're taking care of yourselves. You can also reach out to me personally if you have any questions or would like to talk about anything privately. You can see my email here on my background and you can reach out if you have anything concerning that you would like to share or talk about. So the first thing that we're going to dive into is what we call online enticement. This is essentially the sexual grooming process, but it's done through technology. So essentially, that building trust, establishing a relationship with a child with the intention to exploit the children and their vulnerabilities. So this can usually be done through pretending to be a child and talking to a child online, trying to relate to the children through very difficult topics such as, um, you know, mental health issues, self-harm, or if a child is maybe feeling isolated, they're trying to make them feel like they can depend and lean on this person through this online relationship. And the whole point is to then try and exploit the child, whether that is to sexually abuse them or to maybe exploit them for money. And so we're also seeing a rise of sexual abuse happening online. One type of sexual abuse that occurs in the online world is child sexual abuse material. We also refer to this as CSAM, and this is any visual depiction of sexually explicit conduct involving a minor. So essentially, this can be done either, somebody who is sexually abusing a child is taking videos or images of it or taking pictures of a child while they're nude and posting it online or distributing it. This could also be self-generated, meaning that a perpetrator could be coercing or convincing or threatening a child to send them images that are sexually explicit. And when we talk about some of those features earlier, that generative AI material can also be um, used when it comes to child sexual abuse. So essentially, perpetrators can generate child sexual abuse material, taking very innocent photos of children off of the internet and then putting them through these Nudify apps. We also see a lot of child exploitation. So this is when somebody is exchanging something for the sexual abuse of a child. So this might be a perpetrator's intention to meet up with the child in person. This could be a perpetrator who sends them money or gifts through a gaming platform, buys them V-Bucks, or says, "Hey, I will buy you a new skin for your Fortnite character if you send me these images or if we meet up in person." One of the newer types of online crimes that has been showing up in recent years is financial sextortion. So this is essentially when a person sends a nude image of themselves and then the other person is then blackmailing the child for money. What we have seen is this typically targets teenage boys. Not to say it doesn't happen to girls and younger children as well, but the highest population that is at risk is teenage boys. Excuse me. And so, what a perpetrator can do is use generative AI or um, to either create images of the teen or they will pretend to be, let's say, a teenage girl from a different school. They'll develop a relationship. They will ask the boy to send an inappropriate image of themselves. And then once the teenager sends that image, the person immediately will follow up with threats saying, "I'm going to send this to all of your friends' lists or everybody you know or everybody at your school if you don't get me a $200 gift card, Visa gift card, and send me the information for it." And so that can escalate really quickly and very fast. We have seen cases where from the moment the child was being blackmailed, it took only 24 hours before they died by suicide. So it is extremely stressful for a child to experience this. We want to make sure we're telling kids if anybody is threatening them or asking for money, not to send the money, to talk to a safe adult because there are organizations out there who can help them. And and make sure that, we're keeping them safe. Another type of online crime that happens is through violent online groups. The FBI has named these groups as nihilistic online groups. These are essentially criminal networks online that specifically are targeting vulnerable minors through coercion, extortion, and radicalization. Essentially, the goal is to try and coerce children into committing violent and sadistic acts, including self-harm, animal cruelty, and producing that child sexual abuse material. As a parent myself, this is probably the type of online crime that I think scares me the most, because the whole purpose of these groups is just to gain more status in their online community. So the goal is to try and post the most horrific images or videos of a child or somebody doing something. And when they post it to the group, if you post something that is worse than the last person, you gain status in that online community. It is incredibly sadistic. But there are things that we can look out for as parents. So we want to make sure that we are paying attention to some of those signs, because there definitely are some out there that can give us some awareness that our child might be a victim to some of these crimes. So if we're seeing any type of engaging in sexual conversation online, that's a huge red flag. If somebody is asking or sending sexually explicit images online to our child, trying to develop rapport through compliments, discussing shared interests, or liking their online posts a lot, especially if there's somebody that you don't know, it's not a child that you're familiar with. Sometimes perpetrators will pretend to be younger. They'll offer incentives such as gift cards, alcohol, drugs, lodging, transportation, or food. They might also receive sudden unexplained gifts or deliveries to the home. So if your child is receiving food deliveries or unexplained gifts, we want to pay attention to that. What we had seen when we took a training with the FBI is that oftentimes perpetrators are going to send things to the child's home when they're threatening them, to kind of let them know, hey, I know where you live, as a way to, scare the child and let them know like they can cause harm to them or their families. And then swatting calls at the residence. If you're not familiar with swatting, essentially it is when somebody makes a false report to the FBI that there's some kind of terroristic threat. And sometimes perpetrators will do this again to instill fear. Like to think of their tactics as psychological warfare. They are essentially trying to let the child know, like, I know where you live and look how much power I have if you don't do what I say. So a lot of times people tend to think that these type of crimes are happening on this dark web that's very far removed from us. But the reality is what we're seeing is that youth are usually being targeted in regular platforms like the ones we discussed earlier. But perpetrators are trying to move children from these platforms into these more encrypted sites, such as Discord, Telegram, and TikTok. So essentially what that means is these apps are a lot harder to identify who the person is. So when crimes are committed, perpetrators can hide behind anonymous screen names that protect their IP addresses, for instance, that delete their messages. So if your child is, let's say, playing a game like Among Us, or they're playing games online and they say, oh, my friend online really wants me to download Discord or Telegram so that we can talk, we want to pay attention to that, right? Because the point is to get children to a more encrypted app where the grooming process and the exploitation can occur. So I know we covered a lot of information and it is very scary, but the thing to remember is there are things that we can do. Having this information is so important. Having awareness is such an important piece of being able to protect our kids because if we don't have this information, we don't even know what to look out for. So, this is not about feeling scared. This is about feeling prepared because as parents, there are ways to get ahead of it to make sure that we're keeping our kids safe. So, we're going to talk about some main steps that we can do to be able to prevent our children from experiencing this type of online exploitation. So, first, we can turn on parental controls and safety features. We're going to talk about what ongoing and open dialogue looks like. We're going to also go over monitoring their internet usage and staying informed and updated. So, first and immediate step is we want to turn on all parental controls and safety features on all internet enabled devices, whether that is a phone, a laptop, a tablet, a gaming system, an Apple Watch, right? A smartwatch. We want to make sure that if our children have a device, parental controls and safety features are turned on. This is a must. A lot of apps and platforms have and devices have these safety features built in, but we have to go and turn them on because the default is usually off. So, what is the benefit of parental controls? There are things that we can do, such as set screen time limits. So, we can make sure that, our kids are only on having access to certain apps or platforms or internet searches for a certain amount of days or only at a certain time and it shuts off at 8 p.m. because we want to get them ready for bedtime. We like to say that nothing good online happens after 10 p.m. So there's no reason why our kids should be online that late. We can also get screen time reports where we're checking to see how often kids are using certain apps. So if you're noticing that your child is maybe spending a lot of time on Instagram after school and then in a really bad mood, what are they doing on Instagram? What's happening, right? You can approve and block apps so they cannot download any new platforms without your approval. You can also restrict the kind of content that they receive and put privacy restrictions so they can't search content for kids over the age of 15 or 16, right? We can set some of those limits. And then you can also have location sharing features. I know that there's times where we want to see where our kids are at. If they carpool, they're on a field trip, if they're sleeping over, or maybe with a co-parent or a family member, it could be really beneficial for that reason to be able to see where our kids are at any time. Now, we don't want to just think about one type of parental control. There are different levels, such as device specific. So, the first level is on the actual device itself, such as the phone, the laptop, the tablet, the gaming system. We have to turn them on there first and foremost. However, we also want to make sure that we are turning them on in the actual apps and websites as well. Just because your child has parental controls on their device doesn't mean they can't log on to Instagram or TikTok on a different platform using the web. So we want to make sure if they have any kinds of gaming platforms such as Roblox, Minecraft, any social media websites, we want to make sure we're going into those apps and turning them on as well. And then another great thing to do is using monitoring services. There are actual third-party apps and services that can lock down certain platforms and devices. You can monitor your children's online activity, their messages, who they're talking to, things like that. We suggest some of the highly rated ones here. What we've seen is that Google Family Link is free. You can use it on any device, whether it is Apple or Android. Bark is also a great one as well. They also have really great resources for parents. So just some things to look into if you're interested in any of these parental control apps. Here are some that we have seen to be the most common and highly rated. And then we want to make sure we're having open and ongoing dialogue. So those parental controls are just a first step. what really is the most important part, if you take anything from this presentation, it is having those open conversations with your kids about their online world. We want to make sure that we are talking with them regularly. They are online every day, so we need to have some kinds of conversations about their online world on a daily basis, whether it's, hey, what game are you playing today? Or what are you doing on your phone right now? Or who are you talking to? Hey, make sure you're not talking to strangers, okay? Like, make sure you're not adding people you don't know. We want to make sure that we are having these conversations regularly, just like we have any other safety talk. We also want to ask them about the platforms and devices that they're using and how they're using them. Something that I do with my kids is I will sit down and play the games that they like to play and see how they're using it, what they know about it. It also gives me some insight into what those risks are in their online world. If I need to make sure I'm setting up more parental controls, or if they are interested in a new platform or a new game, my son will ask for permission. I have the opportunity to go search and look up those games or platforms myself and see if it's appropriate for my kid. And it's also important to make sure that they're aware of those risks too. You can have these conversations in an age appropriate way. You don't have to be super explicit. Something I tell my kids is, hey, having the internet is a huge responsibility. There's a lot of dangers on the internet because it wasn't made for kids. And I want to make sure that you're not talking to people you don't know. You're not posting things that are inappropriate. And I have those conversations about some of the outcomes that can happen when, kids aren't being safe online. Some important internet safety rules that we want to make sure that you're talking to your kid about is making sure that they're never sharing their real name or location with a stranger. For those older teens, it's very likely they're playing online with people that they don't know, or that they're engaging with somebody that they don't know at some point on the internet, whether it's through a gaming platform or social media. If they are, we want to make sure that they're not sharing any kind of personal information with those people. We can tell them all day not to talk to strangers, but at the end of the day, kids are going to do what they do online, and so we want to make sure that they know that if they're having those kinds of interactions, they don't share any personal information. We also want them to not accept friend or follower requests from people they don't know. There's a lot of pressure for kids to have a lot of followers, have a lot of likes on their photos. Um, I know that we live in a day and age where being an influencer overnight and becoming famous happens. And so it's important that we really establish that they shouldn't be adding people that they don't know, they haven't met in person. I have a rule with my kids: when they play video games, they can't add people that they don't know, whether they're are people that I haven't had conversations with that other child's parent. So my son wanted to add a kid from his school. I knew that the kid was a real kid. I'd seen him before. I said hi to him, but I hadn't had a conversation with that child's parent because I don't know what rules they have for their child around what's appropriate and what's not. And the moment I met that parent, we had that uncomfortable conversation. Then my son was allowed to add his friend to be able to play games online with. And then we also want them to never share passwords with anybody, not even their best friends. It's very common for kids to share their passwords with their friends, their boyfriends, their girlfriends, to make accounts together. This is just, you know, making sure that they understand that that's not appropriate. It's never safe to share passwords. The only people who should know their passwords are their parents, right? And we want to make sure that it could be dangerous if their friend is posting something inappropriate on their page, or talking to people they don't know on their page. It can really lead back to your child, so they shouldn't be giving that information out. And then, of course, if anything ever makes them feel uncomfortable, we want them to go to a safe adult. And parents, sometimes the conversation that they're having won't be with you. They're scared to get in trouble and get their devices taken away. So they just should know that they need to talk to somebody, whether it is another teacher or a counselor, another family member who they can trust. They need to make sure that they go to somebody who can get them help. A huge part of having that open relationship with our children is also monitoring behavior changes. You know your kids better than anyone. So it's important that we are making sure that we're checking in on those changes that we might see, such as becoming isolated, withdrawn, moody, or irritable. You might notice that they have changes in their appearance, such as neglecting their personal hygiene or hiding specific body parts. With those online violent groups, what we see is they oftentimes will encourage the children to self-harm. And so sometimes those kids might be hiding those body parts to hide their injuries. Changes in eating or sleeping. So whether they stop eating, becoming highly anxious and can't eat or sleep, or maybe they're consuming a lot or experiencing depression because they're being cyberbullied, for instance. So they're wanting to sleep more often than usual. Talking about feeling unwanted or hopeless, expressing thoughts of suicide, of course, that is a huge concern. Unexplained scars and wounds, like I talked about, sometimes those online groups will encourage children to harm themselves using specific patterns or symbols that are called fan signs. Essentially, it is the symbol that represents that violent online community. They spend a lot more time online and get upset when they're not allowed to be on their device because perpetrators are oftentimes blackmailing children or threatening them or very hostile. Sometimes kids feel very anxious when they're not responding immediately. So they might get upset when they don't have access to their device. And maybe they're being secretive about what they're doing online, such as closing windows or their apps the moment you walk in a room, or not wanting to share what they're doing or hiding specific things on their phone. And then, of course, if they're using inappropriate or sexual language that you have not heard them use before, we want to make sure we're checking in with our kids. And like I said, a lot of this information can be scary, but one of the best things that you can do to protect your child is to provide a safe space for open communication. We want to make sure that we are having these conversations, and not in a way where our kids feel like they're going to get in trouble or it's punitive, but in a way where we let them know if something happens, you can come and talk to me. We want to be that resource for our children. We don't want them to navigate the dangers of the online world alone. But if we tell our kids that they can come to us and talk to us about anything, we have to mean it. We can't punish them and take away all their devices and never let them have access to the internet again when they're being honest and open with us about the mistakes that they've made, because they're going to make mistakes. They're kids. It's normal. And so we want to make sure we leave space for that, and we make sure we use those moments to be learning lessons. The next thing we want to do is monitor their internet usage, right? Having parental controls and ongoing conversations is great, but we have to make sure we're staying up to date on what they're doing. When we built this presentation, we were searching how to turn on parental controls on TikTok, and the second highest search is how to turn off parental controls on TikTok, right? Kids are smart. They are very savvy. They know a lot more than we do when it comes to the online world. And like I said, they're going to make mistakes. That is part of growing up and developing. So we need to make sure that we as parents are staying on top of it, because parental controls are just a band-aid at the end of the day. So what we can do is regularly check in on their online activity using their screen time features, having those conversations, looking at how often they're using certain apps and monitoring how many hours they're on their device. Knowing who your children's online friends are, just like we know who their friends are at school. When they stay at somebody's house, we ask who's there, who they talk to, what they did. We need to make sure we're doing the same thing with their online friends. We also want to set some limits and establish those screen-free zones. So I have an open door policy, for instance, in my house. If somebody is on a device, they should not have their door shut. My son plays video games in the common area where I can see and hear at any point the conversations that are happening and what games he is playing. We also you can have like a no devices at the dinner table rule, or it could be your homework needs to be done before you get access to playing video games. You are the parent. You get to establish what their online use looks like, and it's not up for negotiation. That is up to you because getting access to the online world is a privilege that they are getting afforded through you. And then, of course, be transparent. If you are using a monitoring app, if you are checking your child's devices, be open and honest with them about it and let them know, hey, this is not to get you in trouble. This is really about keeping you safe. And I just want to make sure that the things that are happening online are appropriate and that you are being safe. And leave it at that. Those are the conversations I have with my kids about it, and they understand that I'm not doing it to be mad at them or to get them in trouble. That it really is about making sure that their safety is the priority. And last but not least, we want to make sure that we are staying updated and informed. Because the internet is constantly changing, we have to stay up to date about some of the things that are happening from a legislation standpoint, some of the organizations that are doing this kind of work. Um, Thankfully, we know that more people are paying attention to the consequences of online use. When the internet was made, it was not made with children in mind. So a lot of these apps and platforms and websites, they don't care about our kids the way that we do. So it's up to us as parents, as a community, as a society to make sure that we are advocating for change. And luckily, there's already organizations out there that are doing this work. So here are some of the ones that we highly recommend for you to look into. Bark has really great parent resources that are completely free. They have videos on how to turn on parental controls. They have conversations that you can have with your kids, how to start the conversation. We also partner with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Through their Net Smarts program, we go into schools and talk to kids about their online use and how to be safe online. They also have amazing resources for parents as well. And then, of course, Thorn, they're doing a lot of research on exploitation. So if you want to just learn more about what's going on, this is another great organization. And then Protect Young Eyes and Connect Safely also have a lot of information on how to make the internet just a safer place for kids. And all of these organizations are doing such a great job of advocating for a safer internet, not just on a parental level, but from a legislative point as well. And if you are in a situation where you are seeing something concerning online or have concerns about a child meeting up with somebody who they've met online, a stranger, absolutely you can call the Texas Child Abuse Hotline. You can also reach out to the Austin Police Department. Their child abuse unit is full. They also were in that FBI online training that we were in, so they might be aware of some of the things that if you're seeing something online. We recommend also making reports to the Cyber Tip Report line through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. If you're noticing there is somebody pretending to be a child, having inappropriate conversations with a child, or any kind of online exploitation, absolutely make a report to them. They do a really great job. What we recommend is do not delete the messages. They might need the IP address of the user that was sending those things. If you delete the messages, then we lose that information. So what we highly recommend is taking screenshots, saving the messages, but blocking whatever person might be engaging with your child. And then takeitdown.nitmic.org. If you're seeing a situation where there is a photo of a child online that is sexually explicit or inappropriate, that y'all are struggling to get taken down for whatever reason, this is also through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They also do an incredible job of finding everywhere that photo might be posted and working with the websites and platforms to get those images taken down. And thank you so much for your time today, for sticking with me through this presentation. I hope that you learned a lot. Again, please reach out if you have any concerns or you're unsure about anything or you have questions. You can email me at my email behind me on my screen. You can also contact us at our email here for any questions or if you want to learn more about anything else. But please leave a feedback survey if you have the opportunity to. We're constantly trying to improve our trainings. We do provide all of our trainings for free, so it's very helpful to get feedback so we can make sure we continue to provide the most quality workshops to our caregivers and to our community. Thank you so much. And if you're interested about learning more about our organization, you can reach out to us at the centerforchildprotection.org. We are super grateful for any kind of engagement and any questions that you may have. Thank you so much.